go time.
Seriously.
Looks good.
Heck of a baby bump.
Profile there, baby.
Jason Phelps game called.
So let's blow on those for a second. And
It was like a 9.5 out of 10.
you like
really
that?
Good. That was really good.
Thank you.
But it's a really whiny sound. When you get in on a herd and the herd's really vocal, you'll hear a lot of this really whining, drawn out. And so when I'm trying to call a bull in, my cow sound is, and the cow call I use the most is an estrus whine. This is what it sounds like.
You do have a giant head, dude.
It's like 7 5/8. It's up there.
It's giant.
But it would look funny. I'd look really funny if I had like a teeny little head that.
Yeah.
It's
No, I mean, as it is, you do have a Shrek-like appearance. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowman Podcast. We are in the illustrious, no, what's it say? The spirited town along the Columbia River. That's what it said on the sign out there.
Signs don't lie.
Yep, Mount Rainier. We're at XXX Archery Shop here with my friend Corey Miller. On the podcast today, we have Jason Phelps of Phelps Game Calls and the diverse use
multi-use
bugle tube where you can store gallons of water and
kill mice.
It's a mice killing machine. You can beat off a bear with it, stuff like that. No, we're going to sit down with Jason today and have a little talk about elk calling. You just did a seminar last night at G4 Archery here in Oregon. You had like 120,
30, 40 maybe. It was a good turnout. Really
That's awesome. I know a year or two ago we did one, you did one at Bowtech.
Yep.
And we filmed that, and that's one of the episodes. You and Aaron Snyder did a co-presentation on just getting ready for elk hunting.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
So, but you've come out with some new stuff this year. Elk season is right around the corner. I've got a lot of your calls that I've been playing with, and Aaron as well. And I kind of wanted to go over some of those today just to get a feel for how you design them and why you went that way. Yep. And I want to blow on a few and kind of go over this. Just, I was telling Jason before we started, this podcast is kind of just Jason and I hanging out and recording it.
Yeah.
It's really for myself and you just to hang out like we would, whether we're doing a podcast or not.
Yeah.
So anyway, one of the first things I wanted to ask you was about the bugle tube because this bugle tube, it has changed since the one I used last year. And, we've talked about it a little bit, but tell me again, why did you change it? How did you change it? Yeah.
So long story short, we started with our original tube, which like a lot of other hunters do, they go buy a $5.99 bat at a sporting goods store.
Wiffle ball bat.
And you modify it. Growing up, I went through all kinds. I would cut it off, way down. And then I realized, well, if I cup the neck. So we had actually come up with a contract with a company to provide us with, hundreds and hundreds of unlabeled fat bats at the time.
Yeah.
Last year, July, maybe about a month ago, 13 months ago to the day, I had got an email from them that they were no longer in production. Their molds were wore out and they were done. July is about the worst time that can ever happen. But looking forward now and knowing where we're at now, it was kind of one of those blessings in disguise. Like it wasn't good. I had to, mark all of my tubes out of stock. And so it required me to sit down and design one. I say from the ground up, but there was a lot of, knowledge, already kind of established from that fat bat. One of the things I didn't like, was wall thickness. The first thing I wanted to do was make a tube that is extremely sturdy and solid. So we increased that wall thickness right off the bat on this tube, over double what the old tube was. At the same time, it causes some weight penalty by doing that. I'm aware of that. So we do have some large corrugations in this tube to save on the weight and cut down on some of that section. It also adds in some resonance. So just knowing, getting feedback, some of the people on the old tube, they didn't like the smaller mouth, the opening on the intake side. So we flared that out.
Which I really like that because, if anybody who's seen me or listened to the podcast knows that I have a giant mouth. And so, no, for real though, it was really hard for me to blow, and I was used to a very big mouth tube before.
Yep. So it wasn't something that had already been seen. So other people had flared mouthpieces, but for user comfort, we flared it. The next thing we did, and this definitely stems over from the wiffle ball bat, is we kept the handle. It's like, do we eliminate that? Nobody else did, but it does. It makes it a nice grip. As you're walking along in the woods, a lot of times I'll have my bugle tube in one hand and my bow in the other, and it just gives me a little more secure grip. Yeah. And this may be going completely overboard, but where you put your hands on the tube, you kind of steal some resonance. You're kind of muffling that. You're stealing some. Right. So by thickening up that section, it helps a little bit. So that's where I put my hand on it. I've got a thick section. The next thing, which is kind of the magic on the tube, in my opinion, we used to cut a big hole and we didn't have a really cupped end on the tube. We overcupped this end, and so this tube provides a ton of great back pressure. And what back pressure does to a user is as you blow on a diaphragm, you go through your transitions, you get to a high note. You think of getting that high note. If this was a wide open tube, you have to now keep up with that air supply to hold that note. When you load this tube up, you're now holding, I don't know what the real number is. You might be blowing half as much air or, 60% as much air to hold that note. Yeah. It makes it very easy, to hold that note. It makes transitions easier. You're not pushing so much air through. You're not pulling so much air back. The other thing that I didn't really realize, and I don't know if it's a combination of the new diaphragms or the tube, by providing that back pressure, you can stretch out a worn out reed a little bit longer. You're not having to try to overblow a worn out reed, lock them up. So we got some added in benefits there. The last thing we did is, I'm not a big fan of a flex tube. A lot of guys like to bugle with their tube on their back. We just added a shock cord lanyard. We can keep it behind our back. If you want to keep it on your back, you can move around to the front, call, and easily slip it right back behind you.
I really like this. I think it's like, dude, why didn't we think of all this stuff earlier? But to be able to run this tube on this flex and then to pull it out like I'm doing here for those that are watching and actually bugle with it and then have it bounce back. Yeah. It's just like, that's nice because when you have a static line instead of this flexible line, it's like
it has to come off around your neck, over your pack,
and it's constantly swinging around. If you have a flex tube, that can kind of make up for that.
Yeah,
but then you're dealing with a flex tube, which I don't like.
Yeah,
and so
I don't like the sound, but it's nice because usually this ride's pretty straight up and down, like against the side of my pack. It's pretty comfortable.
Yeah,
but we can easily use it, and a lot of times if you're calling a bowl in or whatnot. You've got to drop your tube or you've got to do something with it if you're just hand holding it.
Yeah.
So now you can drop it and you're not going to lose the thing or forget where it's at. It's still attached, but you still have full functionality of running.
I can easily bugle here, or with one hand even bugle while I got my bow in my other hand and then let it go and it's not getting in the way of my shot.
Hook your release right up and you're not trying to figure out what to do with that hand.
I'm always hitting it going, bonk, 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 as I'm trying to do it. And that's one thing I wondered about is this when it's brushing against trees and brush, is it quieter or louder than the old one?
So I had a guy tag me on Instagram, just a normal customer. He's obviously an engineer like myself. He sent me some decibel meter readings. He had took all the tubes that he had and went and bumped them against the a tree, a similar tree, and recorded them all, and he gives me some number. And just because ours is thicker, it's a little bit quieter when it does brush against brush. The camo covers have a little bit different effect. The thicker, we have 5 or 6 different materials. The thicker the camo cover, the quieter it is. But the thick tube actually is quieter as it bumps brush and goes through it. The other, the other thing about the sick tube is the volume. It's a little bit quieter as you run the call, I noticed, especially compared to our old tube, because you're not letting as much kind of resonate through the tube. You're not getting as much feedback. But if you go out in front of the tube, or if you go down 100 yards in the woods as we test these, it's a little bit louder. And just a really rich call. A guy that, I like a lot of volume, but I also want a call that sounds as accurate as possible, has great transitions, great resonance. And when you thump that bugle off, this tube really does excel there.
Well, Aaron makes jokes about it being as big as it is, but we carry these with us when we're out hunting. And, one of the I've heard some comments about it being as big as it is, and people want you to make a pack bugle or something lighter.
We got some. Matter of fact, I talked to Aaron a week ago. He needs one before August 21st. So we've got one. We actually just bought a machine that can do some rapid prototyping for us. So we're definitely going to get some very small. Very, very cool design idea that we put together. Extremely packable, but then we'll expand into a large chamber. As we design these things, the ultimate goal is to sound good, and then try to start there and then work our way backwards. Like, well, how small can we go before it doesn't sound good? How short can we go before it doesn't sound like we want it to?
Right.
How thin can we go on the walls before it doesn't sound like? So we've got I don't want to give too much away, but it's a pretty cool system that you may be able to put together exactly the type of tube that you want.
Okay.
It's in the works.
Good. That'll be sweet. I don't want to compromise sound.
Yep.
So I struggle with it, a bigger tube. I've always carried a wiffle ball back kind of tube because I like the sound I get out of it versus a corrugated pipe, a flex tube, or some of these smaller pack bugles that are out there. Ideally though, it would be nice to have something that is, gives me that sound, but doesn't weigh as much.
Yep. Yeah. And so as we go into all these designs, we set like some goals. Like, am I willing to come in at 95%, 90%, 85% of the sound quality of this if I can save half the weight?
Yeah.
So we'll kind of attack it that way. Like, I'm willing to give up some sound quality, but I better get some drastic weight savings. I better get some drastic space savings in some of those. So that's kind of how we approach that.
Okay. So on another note, you also came out with your new amp calls.
Yep.
So describe those real quick, and then let's get to working on some of these.
So amp frame, we recognize the need just from playing with calls. I'll glue a piece of plastic over top of my old school tradition. We call our the diaphragms we started with conventional, flat, old school diaphragms. We'd bend a piece of Mylar, glue it in place, and then figured out. We realized in about year 2, we started adding a lot of cut pieces of latex on top, and kind of found out that these things play a lot better with support. So it was kind of natural to migrate to a hybrid plate type style. There's some timing involved, there's some support involved, there's some fit involved. I didn't realize how many people can't use the flat or traditional until we started making them. Like, hey, I just gag on them, they don't sit in place. And so we set out. There were some patents in place when we started the design, and so we had to sit back. 2015, we actually had this designed at the end of 2014. Being a small company, we kind of sat back and let some of these other companies release theirs. We were working on it, we were changing it, we were messing with the timing on that plate, making sure it was comfortable, and then to find a manufacturer that was willing to do the progressive die and get all of those. So as we designed this thing, we weren't designing the actual, all-encompassing aluminum frame that we have now. We would take a plastic dome in the exact shape of this, glue it on, test it, make a change. Me and my brother are both engineers by nature. We both do a lot of 3D design. We'd get back in the program, change the profile, shoot it off, have 10 prototypes shipped to us, and send it out to the guys to test. No, that's not right. I'm not getting a good enough bugle. This is cutting out here. We'll change the height, change the shape, change the profile, send it back in. And so I think ultimately we have a couple different versions. We have some 1.1s, 1.2s. I think by the time we were done, we made like 17 small revisions to this frame. Last year, they were ready in August. You had received some to test.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to do is it's easy for me to go out and design a call that I love, which It doesn't even have to do with how good you are at running a call. A guy like me may like something completely different than a guy like you may like something completely different than Corey or Aaron or anybody.
Right.
And so I shotgun these out to guys that I knew said, your flat frames suck. I love you. I love you, Jason, but I'm not using your flat frames. I'm going to use these. The guys that say, hey, I love domes, but I hate a plate and I hate your flat frames. Mm-hmm. I found guys that loved domes, hated domes. Guys that loved plates, hated plates.
It's so different when you're putting something in your mouth.
Yeah. So our goal was to just shotgun these things out to everybody that hated them, get feedback from everybody, and then if we could make one more revision or maybe a couple more revisions right going in. The feedback we got and from everybody that used them was positive as it could get. We really didn't get anybody that couldn't fit, and nobody that thought they were uncomfortable, nobody that couldn't use them. For the most part, durability for getting them in the middle of August and pressing these things out and getting them out to you guys.
And I've been blowing them here. I wanted to go over some of those today. Because I can't blow them all the same. Like I struggle with some, but some I'm like, hey, I'm getting better. And it's with any call I've ever used, whether, it's Primos or something else. I have always, some just are a lot easier to use right out of the box, but they all take a little practice to get the hang of them, like any kind of instrument.
And I think that's one thing I struggle with. And I try to direct guys into the black or the gray because I get the most feedback on them. They seem to get the best, feedback, the best response. But all calls aren't meant to work for everybody. Like me, I build the orange, and that's once again going 100% back on feedback from other users. I blow right through an orange call. It's too light for me.
So you like typical? Most people like this black one,
the black and the gray.
So that's funny. The green one was by far like my easiest one to use, but you have the ant black, and you say it's a medium cow calf raghorn bull. And the gray is a mature cow large bull. So let's blow on those for a second. And I'm just curious, I messed around with it a little bit the other day to see.
You're going right out of the package. You're making me nervous.
It's the black one. Right out of the package. That's right, baby. So now this is a small bull. And why do you say that?
So when I go to bugle on a call, like the gray, I can put everything I got into that gray, and I know it's going to be there. I've got the support. I've got the confidence that I can hammer on that gray call, make the biggest, loudest lip balls, the biggest growls, put as much volume into that call, and it's going to hold up. This red, you're a little higher pitched, more of that, and if you try to overblow it,
you're red latex.
Yeah, you're
in the black call.
Yeah, in the black call. Red latex in the black call. If you try to overblow this for me, easy to use.
It's soft. It's really easy to me. I think it's pretty easy to cow call in this. And you little practice, get feeling where it's at.
So the gray, we're running the black now. So it's just got that higher pitched cow and calf sound. And then the gray is that deeper. It's just, and we make all these changes with different thicknesses and latex, different stretches. So our gray is just that deeper cow.
All right. So this is the sound with me on the black. It's soft. I'm actually blowing on it too hard. I have to back way off of it. Okay, so that's the black
That's
one.
the black.
That was you. Go ahead and do the gray. That's tight. It's a lot tighter.
And so we go up in thickness and we go up in tightness as well. So here's a great kind of a learning stage. So a lot of guys want to put them in cow call.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend right out of the package cranking a bugle off on that thing. It kind of sets that reed.
The bugle's way easier to make than a cow call.
I don't know what it is. These things are fairly user friendly out of the box, but after you do, so like the born and raised outdoors calls we've made, for example, those are stretched way tighter than any of my calls I make. In order for me to get a cow call out of them that sounds good, I just pick them up right out of the package, crank 2 bugles, and then try to play with my cow calls.
Yeah, because I find that I need, for a good bugle, I need a tight latex.
It was like a 9.5 out of 10.
You like
really
that?
Good. That was really good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that coming from you.
I have my head. I can't really hear, but
this is that's a gray.
Yep.
I really liked this one, but I liked the green one. The reason, so what I found as I was going through all these and laying them out on my bed at home, I was like, dang it, this reed, the ones I really liked for bugling, I had a hard time making cow calls on. Like I can do it, but I can't make them so soft
sweet,
and sexy and comfortable, as I can with a softer. So that's like the catch-22. So in the past, I would use a couple of reeds that are super tight, and I could rip a good bugle out of them, and I had a lot of control. But as soon as I added tried to cow call with them, I'd have to switch it back and forth.
And that's frustrating.
And that's bad in the heat of the moment when I'm really trying to create something. So I usually try to compromise and find something that I can get where I can kind of get the sound I want out of both.
And that's, for me personally, like, in comp calls or even in the woods, which really what's mattered to me, I do 99% of everything on the gray. It's my go-to call. I can cow call on it, I can calf call on it, I can bugle, everything. I do use the white a little bit for locating. It's a little bit louder. It's even tighter than the gray. So we'll go to the white a little bit if we're on a high ridge trying to really reach down the basin. But you've kind of alluded to something that I don't think a lot of people understand, or they're quick to judge, my a company as a whole, or any call company. I feel bad because, I still test all my competitors' calls, and within those 15 diaphragms that competitor makes, I like maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And, or if I was to blow so-and-so's calls, I would use this one or this one.
Right.
But if I would have just picked up the other 2 I don't like, it's like, that's not a good representation, where you're kind of saying that green is good for you, where the gray is good for me. And some guys that don't like the blows out, they think the black's their call. For everything. Right. And so it really is trying to find
I think you really do have to. That's why I like getting, when I would get calls in the past, I would buy like all 10 of the Primos. And then I would blow on them, give each one of them a good chance. On my way to work, I would blow and work on it for a half hour on my way to work. And then on the way home, I'd try the next one and the next. And pretty soon it was like, well, these 2 are standouts. These, I can get sound out of them, but sometimes they betray me. And some sound comes out that I didn't want to come out.
They let you down.
Right. And you really don't want that in the heat of the moment. I remember... I can remember stuff like that happening when you're really on the line and you got something going good, and all of a sudden, and you don't have confidence that when you do that cow call, it's actually going to sound like a cow call. And the next thing you know, you're going, in the moment, you need the bull to and now he's like, whoa, wait
trying to make that perfect call, and all of a sudden just, oh, what was that?
And so, like you said, when you get a lot of different calls and you get, there's somewhere you're just fail proof. You can nail them every time. And not every call is the same like that. Okay, so my buddy Chris is here, Conacher, eating some lunch, and he just got mauled by Corey's bulldogs.
That's funny.
Casper was trying to crawl into my backpack earlier, and I'm like, what is he so obsessed with on that backpack? And then I realized I had some smoked salmon jerky in there.
There you go.
That's a smell.
I'm about ready to attack your backpack.
Yeah, no doubt.
A little bit.
Okay, so let's blow on this green one.
So I'm gonna trick everybody, but I'm gonna tell everybody what I'm doing.
Okay.
So I hate the green tape. It's got a little bit of a bitter flavor, but more importantly to me, it's got a stiffer tape on it.
This green tape,
the neon green.
Okay.
Is a
not
little
the
bitter.
latex.
Not the latex. So this is the same exact call. I just put black tape on my green. We've
Oh,
got
God.
blue latex,
Yeah.
so not to confuse anybody. It's just the way that I can't market 2 black calls, so it's got to. And so what it is, just so everybody knows, neon green dye. I've read all the MSDS. It's just got a bitter taste to it.
It's got after a day or two, it can't taste.
Yeah, it kind of goes away.
Dude, I don't care. I just that's like.
But some guys prefer a
weenie.
thicker tape, a stiffer tape.
How should a cow call sound ideally? Like,
So there's I don't want to get too much into the different types of calls, but when I'm hunting during September, my cow call is almost always an estrus whine. It's that really needy, drawn out, whiny cow call. There is cow to cow communication, that simple calf cow mew. That's just cows communicating with cows, communicating with calves. When I go out there, everybody's got their own coined terms. I don't know if my definition is the same as your definition, the same as Joe's definition. But it's a really whiny sound. When you get in on a herd and the herd's really vocal, you'll hear a lot of this really whining, drawn out. And so when I'm trying to call a bull in, my cow sound is, and the cow call I use the most is an estrus whine. This is what it sounds like. I'm trying to portray that message to that bull that cow needs some attention.
why don't we try that? Let's see if I fall flat on my face. Maybe this mic. Do it again. Let me copy it.
So and then I try to get that deep, like
You're getting deeper than I was.
yeah. So I'll drop my jaw, drop my tongue, and then just really try to hold that deep note on the end. Yeah, that and
Keep in mind, folks, I've never used Jason's calls before, and so really they feel a little different, but it's also a testament. I pick them up, and I just used a couple like 3 days ago, and got a hang of these new ones, and that's where I was like, I like this green one, but I don't have the command of these yet, like I do the calls I've used in the past.
yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Like that.
Yeah, that was good from what I can hear.
I gotta get used to not blowing so hard.
Yeah, that is. I mean, so some guys, that come over from a different call company or that were even used to our old conventional flats, they overblow these things. It truly is the diaphragm itself takes a little pressure, and then you combine it with a tube, and you're like, I actually have breath left when I'm done being
Yeah,
one.
no doubt. I kind of want to try the gray one for that cow call.
Yeah. I've always ran mine. That's the nice thing about the plate is you can run them a little further forward. I still tend to run these things straight up in the middle.
Yeah, it's going to take some practice with it being tighter.
Yeah.
And the other one's soft.
Yeah, and the white, is the tightest of them all. So, and that's, the black sound like it came easy, the green, and then you get into these gray and the white, and things get pretty tight. that the black? Yeah,
black is so much easier to get those cow calls. That's why I'm like switching back and forth.
Yeah, and everybody's different. Like some guys can't even cow call on the white. It's not even tight enough. So it's just everybody's so different trying to find out what works for you. Yeah. That seems easier for,
yeah, this is way easier.
Yeah.
I got to take a bigger breath.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah, that long
deep,
drawn out whine.
Long drawn out whine. Yeah.
And that's typically what my cow calls are when I'm out in the woods. You know, if we hear a cow mew back and forth, and we, you know, if the timing's right and we want to get involved in that, we may communicate with her that way. But typically, we're trying to get close and just use that mew.
So you kind of use that whiny sound, and then what do you do on the bugle side?
Challenge. So there's two different types of challenge bugles. I got the fortune to go to New Mexico last year, hunt bulls down there. And so the two different types of challenge bugle, in my opinion, you've got my typical challenge bugle, and then you've got like that lip ball challenge where you hammer your lip ball. So I'll get in close as I can. We'll give them that estrus whine, and then we'll immediately follow it up with a challenge bugle, which I'll do my standard, and I'll kind of do it with the lip ball. So
okay.
So that's kind of my standard challenge. It's kind of clean, and then you add a lot of that aggression in. You're just trying to be the biggest, baddest bull in the woods. And this is just my approach, and there's 1,000 different ways to do it. And if I'm going to do the lip ball, so for those of you that don't know, you sputter your lips, you put the call in, and then doing that through the tube.
Okay.
So we add just a different sound, a different rattle, a different realism to that call. And then I make my decision out in the woods. What I'm going to do is based on if you're the bull I'm trying to call in and you're lip balling, I'm going to lip ball and mimic you. If you're the bull that's screaming at me, I'm going to scream at you. And so we just I let that bull dictate after I make my first bugle kind of what I'm going to sound like.
Okay. Do that first one again, and I want to try to see. I'm going to try it. What is this, the black one? It's pretty soft.
The black should put up quite a bit on the bugle. You should be good. So you did the same thing we did. We add that throat back in about halfway through the bugle. So you get up to your high note, hold it for a second, and then I try to incorporate that growly throat back into that note.
It seemed it was kind of hard to really blow on it without it giving out.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the same reason I love the black. I can beagle on it, but I feel like I'm really holding myself back with the gray. And then the white, the white is we haven't talked about locators a lot. The white, it's on the verge of being almost too much for me and my style, but it is just loud. It's probably 150% of the gray. It's just it's in a next level. And so white, we talk about locators.
Yeah,
that's probably the call. If that starts the game for me, and on a hunt, I probably blow locator bugle 90% of the time, 95% of the time. Until the game started, that's all I'm doing every 200 yards.
So what does that sound like?
It's a real high note, 2 or 3 note. I try to keep it pretty clean. So here's my locator bugle. And just kind of cut it off. I'm trying to only hold that for 2 or 3 seconds. I used to back in the day hold it for a long time. Think I'm going to get more of a response, but I found out I need to kind of cut that off and start to listen.
Like that?
You add a little more growling. I try to keep it clean, like just as clean as possible, and then just kind of thump it off. So I don't want to add a bunch of growl, but I kind of imagine trying to make that as loud as I can at the end. Like, let's load the tube up and pop it, kind of. Yep, just like that. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, it was. I had to concentrate on that. Like, I didn't want to. It's so easy. It's so hard not to growl at the end.
Growler.
Like, I don't know.
And it doesn't. We get so caught in this rut on do this or this.
Right.
There's been many times
like
where
Aaron will say you're picking fly crap out of chili.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's times when I say my locator bugle's a 2 to 3 note clean note. It's that noise that rattles your ear, and then I might lie to you because the next bugle I might do a big challenge bugle just because I'm like, there are elk here. I just cannot get these dang things to answer.
Right.
And so I might say, screw my locator bugle on the next one and go right into a challenge bugle to try to get something to answer.
I don't really do the lip ball very often.
Yep.
But I have sometimes, like when I'm trying to sound really pissed off.
Yep.
It was tough with the other bugle tube because the mouth was a little narrow.
Yep, and you had to really try to get inside or stay back a little bit.
But do another one for me.
Lip ball?
I want to try it. Uh-huh. So at the end, when you're done, you kind of do a high to low.
Yeah, it's just kind of my style. Like, everybody's.
Well, it sounds good,
yeah,
though.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've transitioned in and out. Lip balls for me, finding out, well, what do you do at the end? How do you don't just shut it off. And so I kind of go out of my lip ball back to high and then kind of growl it off, kind of like our challenge bugle.
I don't know if I've ever tried that. So much of what I do, I'm just like in the heat of the moment, just going,
and
with intensity.
And a lot of times, we sit. That's how I'm out in the field. We sit here and talk about this. I let the situation tell me if that bull's hammering with the lip ball and growling, chuckling at the end, I'm just going to do the same. Or I just kind of let the situation tell me what to do.
Okay, here goes. It's kind of hard to switch.
Yeah,
back to the end.
That sounded good. I mean, so like I wind in, I kind of slowly wound up into my lip ball where you were in the lip ball right off the bat, and there's just so many.
I don't have that kind of control.
No, there's so many. I actually do it because it helps me out, kind of getting into it. Where there's. Yep, and everybody's different, and elk are different. I mean, I might run into a bull on the basin that sounds like that, and then we might run into one that starts out really whiny and lip balls. Yeah. It just every elk's different.
Well, I want to go for realism. I want it to sound real, and honestly, when you're standing in the woods and he's coming down the hill or whatever, and there's trees in the way and stuff. I mean, it all sounds surprisingly real.
Yep.
Until you have an actual elk in a bugle. I've been called in by a few hunters here and there that are good. I mean, you can't tell. And then there are times where we've dismissed an elk. We've said this before. We're like, that's a hunter. And then you show up and it ain't a hunter. That's a giant bull.
Yep.
So you can't, it's so hard. And that's when I've learned too that you don't have to sound. I heard a few bulls that sound like a few fluty Primos call with a blue latex or the blue reed on the end, and I'm like, that is a hunter. And it's like, woo 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 woo.
Yeah.
At the end, and and sure enough, that was a bull.
Nope, there's on a hunt in 2013. I was bailing off the mountain. I'm like, I take a lot of pride being a call maker. I can distinguish between a real elk and a hunter. And me and Charlie climbed up to a high basin, just getting in there, elk sign everywhere. There were a few other rigs in the area, so like the chances of a hunter, it was a good possibility. And I rip off a bugle and something answers, and I'm like, nope, going back to the truck. We're going the other way. He's like, hold on. I'm like, no, I'm not even sitting here so that people think that I sat around long enough to be called in and do it again. I'm like, nope, same thing. There's a person. He's gonna, and all of a sudden, Charlie, I think, threw his binoculars up, and he's like, there's a cow coming. Like, there's no way. and the bull bugles again. I'm like, there's a hunter behind the herd of cows.
Right. Something ain't right here.
And all of a sudden this bull walks into view, and sure enough, like, normally I would never have that chance because I was bailing off the mountain just so nobody seen me sitting there.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked about this before. You like to do some locators, like you said, like you locate a bull, then you go straight at them.
Yep.
That's typically how you do it. You're not going around the hill or whatever, because an elk doesn't do that.
I'll go around. It depends. If the terrain sets up that, if I look over there and like, man, to go right at that thing, the wind's going to be hosed. But I've got a good approach if I sneak around the ridge and come down on them. We'll go around them. But
when you can, you're common sense. I mean, if there's a gorge there, you're not swimming it. Like.
So the idea is to always put your nose down and go, though. It's just trying to figure out how you're going to approach that. We want to get in, get tight.
And then as you get close, like Corey Jacobson talked about how he likes to cow call and do some estrus or whatever until he gets in there close. And then once he's in there, that bull, when it bugles, he cuts it off.
Yep.
You like to do something similar?
Me and Corey have talked about strategy a lot. The only spot our strategy differs is I'll be the first to bugle where he wants that bull to bugle first. Mm-hmm. And we kind of always, I think we've even mentioned this on the pod, we kind of joke around that it's like, well, once he bugles and then you bugle, then it's back to, versus where I bugle, he bugles, and we're right back. So we end up at the same spot. I've just bugled one more time. And I love to hear myself bugle. So it's actually
What do you think is, Corey said this before, emotion is a big part of what he thinks works. It's like say what you mean to the bull. So how do you do that?
I play 100% prescriptive and on temperament. And to preface this, there is no one way. There's no right way. There's a whole lot of wrong ways, and I've learned all those too. But there are people that have claimed, our good buddy Joel. He's got a system. He believes this sound means this, and the elk will react this way, which works. He kills bulls, obviously. Mm-hmm. So I'm an idiot to sit here and say that's garbage.
That doesn't work, or that theory's off.
But me and Corey's theories, the same ideas, where we play on temperament. Like I want to get that bull so fired up that he can't even think straight anymore, and he has no other thing on his mind but to come tear me up or to come get his cow back, whatever picture I've painted. So we play on temperament and touched a lot on it last night in the seminar. Mm-hmm. Is I've taken a lot of bulls where they might answer me a minute later, like, you're not even interested. Like, no, I want to find a bull, but you're all I've got to work on, or I may have like an hour and a half left at night. Yeah. I've got in there and through mimicry, kind of turned the temperature up on him from getting close to acting like I'm going to steal his cow. I've went from him not responding to me for a minute or two or just kind of acknowledging me to he is cutting me off. And so we've kind of escalated this situation up to a point where he's now fired up.
And how do you push that button?
So, and I'm trying to, I think it's human nature to try to
overthink it,
and try to relate to your own personal experiences. So, like, I've got my little boy Hunter. My little boy Hunter, 7 years old. Mm-hmm. He's in a mimicry stage, right? And so, hey Hunter, stop doing that. Dad, stop doing that. Hunter, I'm serious. Dad, I'm serious. And we sit there and go back and forth. In about 4 rounds of that, I'm ready to
kill him.
To chase him down and paddle his butt. And,
right.
And so I think, well, that ticks me off pretty dang quick. And so I think bulls like to feel like they have a voice, and if you're cutting them off, if you're sounding just like them, if you're trying to one-up them on I think there's some emotion involved in that, sounding like them, getting very close. So it's that not only are we kind of copying them, not giving them a voice in the situation, we're getting very close to him and his cows. That's his for sure thing. That's his, bulls live to breed and fight and live. Mm-hmm. That time of year, we're trying to take away their ability to breed by getting close, creating a threat. You get them to the point where you're going to maintain your cows or you're going to lose them to me, the hunter. Mm-hmm. A lot of those herd bulls, even your satellite bulls will come in, curious, but your herd bulls strategy, they're going to come in and try to defend them. That's all they've got going. That's their sure thing. If you come in and take it from them, they're not going to go down without a fight. And so you're kind of acting on a few different parallels there, but all that adds to get that bull fired up.
Okay. I've seen Anthony do this before where he calls and calls and calls and kind of tries to keep it. He mimics the bull a lot, and the bull's not that excited. He's not that excited, but they're kind of talking back and forth, and and then slowly he starts kind of adding a little more to it and a little more to it until they're both kind of going at each other. Yep. And he can kind of build it up into something that it just wasn't in the beginning.
Exactly.
And then, and a lot of times, I mean, how often do you move in on the bull versus wait for the bull to come to you?
A lot of times we are moving closer, and if anybody's watched any of our short hunts that we've put together, there's multiple setups. Next time the camera's on, we're not in the same spot.
Yeah.
And then the next time the camera's on, we're not in the same spot. So I think we can do some harm if we push and shadow a bull. A lot of times in the morning, we'll shadow them. It's a little bit different than actually setting up, and trying to call that bull in. We're not necessarily pushing them, but they're doing their own thing. They're either going from bed to food or they're milling around in the timber, whatever they're doing. You're just trying to finally kind of break that bubble. You're trying to get inside, penetrate that bubble to that point where you're now close enough to him that he doesn't have any chance but to come to you. So a lot of our hunts, we're always pushing that. If I'm sitting in my very first setup and I can hear that bull bugle, and then he may bugle 50 yards closer, we're done. We're not going to move for a little bit until we start to hear him go away. One of the things I still struggle with, depending on the terrain, and like my New Mexico hunt last year was a complete eye opener to me, is by a bull spinning in the same spot, watch him bugle that way and turn around and bugle at you. If I can't see him, I might have just misjudged yardage by over 100 yards.
Right.
So that's the other thing we're trying to gauge, like,
which way
I want like
facing?
a third bugle. I want like a fourth bugle to figure out, is he truly moving? A lot of times we do make some good choices, but there's been times like you've popped around a tree like, he hadn't moved. He must have just turned around to bugle at his cows or something.
And you're right there in his
right
living room, and you just pushed him.
Yeah. So every situation's different. A lot of times we're gaining ground. We hunt fairly aggressively. A lot of time we joke around, if we're not bumping elk, we're not hunting elk. Our typical style.
Well, I do see that. Like, a lot of guys are frozen by indecision. They're not aggressive enough, and so they could have created a shot opportunity if they were more aggressive. But they were so cautious that they just tend to call back and forth with elk a lot.
Yep.
Because they're kind of waiting for that magic, Primo's truth video moment where that bull comes 100 yards right into their setup and stands at 20 yards.
Yep. No, and I talked a lot in length about two-color setup last night, and I don't get me wrong, I grew up watching every Primo's video. I was waiting for the day it hit the shelves so I could go down to the to Sunbirds and pick up the Truth 9, the Truth 10. I loved it, but as I learned and I started to paint this picture for myself, it's like it doesn't happen that way for very many people in very many places. Like, you can't set up 75 yards behind your collar and lure, a 330 satellite bull into you. It just doesn't work that way in the areas that I hunt, due to pressure, terrain.
Yeah.
A lot of times setting up a collar 75 yards behind, if that's the elk, that's the threat, you're now way outside the bubble where the hunter's the one that should be calling. And so even though we do a lot of two-collar setups where I may be calling for you sitting, I'm right here on your shoulder. What that does for me is now gives me full visual of exactly what you're seeing. If I'm 75 yards back and I can't see you, I've lost all of the ability to hear this, crank it up. And then I've also now put that threat within that 100, 125 yards where I feel there's a lot better chance that bull's going to break or come in versus if I'm 200 yards back calling.
Okay.
But the whole bull bugling frenzy, the rut frenzies, I've ran into a few spots like that where a couple herds have come together and it's been pretty chaotic, but nothing to the extent where I can just sit back with a cow call and a 330 slips off and comes in.
I think, as we're talking about, the moment of truth kind of moments, the last bit here, or how you're getting in close. I mean, it's the part that people often don't put together. For those that are kind of new to all of this, the one thing that I just want to throw out there really quick is if the wind is blowing the wrong direction, the game is over. So this is assuming. Everything we're talking about is assuming they don't smell you. Yeah,
we haven't gotten it. Yeah, it's like you can fool their ears, you can sometimes fool their eyes, but you're never going to fool their nose.
Right.
That's everything we're talking about is assuming that everything else is dialed in.
Yep. So, what are some other sounds that you like to make? When you're in close, besides that challenge.
So, I'm pretty vanilla ice cream type of an elk caller. Locator, estrus wine, and a challenge bugle. Like I say, one spot where I also agree you don't have to be the best caller in the world, but by being a good caller, I can dang near match or figure out really quickly however to sound like that bull. So another thing we get a lot around home, especially West Side Roosevelt's around here. I haven't hunted around home since 2011, I think.
Yep.
We got a lot of grunts and chuckles. Maybe sometimes that's primarily all you get out of them. You don't get any of the high notes.
You do that a lot with Roosevelt elk.
So I mean growing up, just cutting your teeth on what was in my backyard. I've even heard from guys like Jim Horn that have judged contests I've called in some of these known callers. They're like, man, you chuckle and grunt a lot. I'm like, it's ingrained. It's what I know.
It's what we hear.
So
I've hunted Roosevelt elk where all they do is chuckle.
Yep, chuckle, grunt, or maybe
so. So give us that sound.
So, and I don't, everybody's got different names. So in my opinion, the chuckle is more of like your ape-like sound, really knocky, and then the grunt is more of your deep elky sound. So I'll do a chuckle really quick, and then I'll go into a grunt. Now a lot of elk sound. Now a grunt has more of that elk tone, deep thumps, 7 to 8, and I slowly kind of tail them off.
Okay.
So that's what I differentiate between like a chuckle versus more of your drawn out grunts. My style, I don't know why I do it. My first grunt's a little bit shorter, and then my second kind of goes higher, and then I slowly start to taper them down.
I think it's just instinctive.
Yeah, it's how I do it, and people do something different. I'm like, that's what I go back to.
Yeah, I want to try it, but I noticed that, and I've told people this too, that you're breathing in.
Yeah, make sure you're. A lot of guys will send me a video clip or an audio clip, and I'm like, what do you need to work on? I'm like, your grunts and chuckles. How do you do that? I'm like, well. So I'll go through what I tell them. Practice an alarm bark. It's a different sound cows make. It's one of the worst sounds I can hear besides the stinking wolf howling. Yeah, practice that. Imagine loading that tube up and getting that chunk, that big thump into the tube.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
So do that, and then take a big loud breath.
I can't hit that tone.
So you want that inhale to be audible. So once you kind of got that thump down, then realize on how to put it all together. There you go. And then I throw some voice in it. Kind of that. There you go. So as you're trying to learn to grunt, so now you've got that, and then you make a big, loud, audible inhale. So you can hear me kind of thump the tube and try to pull really some air back in.
Do it again.
And so then you try to just put 7 or 8 of those together in cadence.
Mm-hmm. That's a chuckle.
Grunt. In my opinion, who knows what the definition is? So that's kind of how I explain to do that. Get the alarm bark down, and then figure out how to.
When I think of a chuckle, then I think of something. I think of, someone who's excited.
It's a quick. It's more repetition. It's more of a knocky. Yeah, so you're still adding more of that thump at the end, where I just try to make it as knocky sound, and there's no right or wrong way to do it either. There's bulls that will do any combination of the two. And this is just my observation. I've watched hundreds of bulls do that chuckle. A lot of times they're pissing all over. It's a weird time. They when they get that, they're like pissing on themselves and they're pissing it in unison to the
I
chuckle.
See him chasing a cow he's more like he's talking to a cow than another bull. I had a hard time.
And the gray may be a lot to put that much air through it. I was
going to try the black here. Except you're not going as deep. It's too short?
No, that's right. I just try to do it as quick as possible, but chuckle-wise, like I say, your chuckle grunts can mix. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Huh. Okay. So you throw that in there. What about breaking trees and branches and stuff like that?
I am a huge proponent of stomping, scraping, bashing sticks, beating the tree up.
You're a wildlife.
I'm a beater.
abuser.
I'm a beater. Pick pick up that 2-inch, 2.5-inch, diameter stick. That one that is not going to break. It's gonna be with you for the entire battle type of a stick.
Right.
Find a jackfur, find an old growth log. A lot of times as you call these bulls in, they've got their horns in the dirt. They're finding a tree to beat up. I'm just trying to emulate that. A lot of times you don't even sometimes need to call. I might do my first calling sequence and then go to beating the heck out of a tree. Or, I'll throw a stick to my cameraman or my caller that's 5-10 yards behind me and say, you beat up on a stick so I can be ready. So we do. Elk make a lot of noise, and I kind of joke that my uncles and my dad give me crap. That's why I picked up archery hunting, is because I have zero woodsmanship skills.
Right.
So I can tromps around, be as loud as I want, because elk, as you're calling them in, should make noise. I've never called in a silent bull. I've never, snuck in.
Oh, they're breaking everything on that
silent herd of elk. Some have surprised me and been extremely quiet, but we get to get away with a lot of noise, and elk make noise, especially when you get into that bubble, that 100-yard bubble. The woods are fairly quiet. You should start to be able to hear some natural sound. It's natural to be able to hear raking and beating of brush.
We've had experiences where a bull is bugling at us, and all we do is keep raking, and it seems to enrage them that we're not calling back.
Yep.
That we just keep raking a tree. And they keep calling and calling and calling, and by then you're like, I'm done talking to you, and you're just raking a tree, and then they come in.
Yeah, there's been, if I have visual, a lot of spots we hunt are brushy, and I can't see that bull until he's in within shooting range. Mm-hmm. But there's been a few bulls I've been able to see 100, 150 yards. I'd say on 60 or 70%, even the ones I can't see, I've been able to hear. Somewhere along the way, they're going to stop and rake a tree. They're going to beat the heck out of something.
Right.
And so it's a natural process. And a tidbit that I've got from our good buddy Ryan Lampers, he said he learned from an old timer in Idaho. Somebody that taught him how to hunt elk and was very successful. Ryan said he won't pick up a stick unless it's 4 inches diameter or bigger. It's like the old timer told him he believes that big bulls or the bulls he's trying to target can tell how big that stick is you have in your hand. And so he wants to be that 4.5-inch, that thick, heavy horn bull.
Yeah. Ryan kills giant bulls. So.
That's why I told him after he told me, I'm like, you'll never see me pick up a 2-inch stick again. I'm going to try some, heck, I might even pick up 6-inch diameter logs.
I might grab a log next time. Hey, man, I mean, there's probably some truth to that. Who knows, man?
If he does it and it works, I'm dumb not to give it a try.
Yeah. So you bring the big artillery in there. So what else? Anything else that you throw at them that we haven't mentioned?
A lot of wind checker that hopefully doesn't get. I'm constantly checking the wind, but call wise, it's pretty plain. It's prescriptive. The other thing that I can't tell you sitting in the seat right now is if I hear there might be a cow mewing excitedly up the hill, that may trigger me. We talk about the knack a lot, not having a reason for why we do it.
Right.
But if she is just hammering, if she's hammering on a excited cow call and I feel like she may be stealing my bull back or something, because that bull's leaving his for sure thing to come check out this cow or this bull that are off on the outskirts.
Right.
She may be trying to yank that thing back. So I may try to one-up her, and be that. It's tough to sit in this chair and tell you exactly what I'm going to do every time until some of these,
right.
situations evolve.
Yeah, I think some of it's experimental on the fly, too.
It is.
Like you... I mean, I'll do something let's say I used to blow that Primos hyper lip, the double hyper lip deal.
Yep.
And this is back when it first came out, and there were times where I would bring out that call, and whatever the elk was doing, he'd been calling, doing the back and forth, but not really moving. I pull out that thing, and I'm like beep, and he just keeps walking in.
Yep.
Oh, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm coming straight in. And then you'd stop and he would stop. And then as soon as you blew again, he'd come in. Yep. And you're reading the situation. You're like, well, he likes it.
I'm going to keep going. Yeah,
so
keep going.
Keep doing it.
Yeah, feed him what he loves. And, there's weird instances where I consider myself a really good diaphragm caller. Mm-hmm. There are times when, the same thing, similar to the hyper, this call is the only thing I can get him to answer on it. It ticks me off to know.
And you're holding. For those that are listening, you're holding your external read.
Yeah, my external read the same. Your hyper lip.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this is my version, and there'll be a time when it's like, really, he won't answer a bugle. He no longer answers my sound. He no longer answers my cow call. on a diaphragm, but yet he'll pipe off within an instant on this thing. And in that case, it's like, I'm done trying to reason with why this is working.
Right.
I know this is working. I'm gonna keep hammering it until it doesn't work.
That's what I was gonna say. Sometimes it's just experimenting, and trying stuff until all of a sudden the bull's like, oh, I like that. I'm gonna, and they're responding to it. So then it's like, why fix what's not broken?
Yep.
Just keep giving him stuff that he likes. And when you're doing things that doesn't seem to trigger anything, stop doing that. Do something else.
And the most frustrating thing about elk hunting, but one of the things I love the most, so it's kind of that catch-22, is situation A, like you said, you hit that hyper lip, he comes in, or the situation where I estrus mew, I got a cow excited, so I get excited cow, it works this time. The next time I go into that same situation, like, oh, I've been here before, I'm going to do that same thing, and next thing you know, the bull's 2 miles away on the next ridge, like, what the heck? There's no rhyme or reason why it worked that time and it failed miserably this time. It may fail 10 more times miserably in a row, but then that 11th time it comes back and works just like it did. And it's like, really, how am I supposed to come to a conclusion on what I'm supposed to do every time? And that we've coined the term like tears and years is how we figure this out. But even the years of failure or try after attempt after attempt, the only thing that's predictable is uncertainty in what you're doing.
Yeah.
We sit here and I try to tell you, well, I do this and then I do this and then I do this. And,
except for when I don't.
Yeah, except for when I don't, or when I go out there and 8 times in a row, it doesn't work. But I'm so stubborn that I'm going to do it. I'm going to prove that this is how I do it. And so on the 9th time, it works.
Yeah.
I think everybody, no matter what your skill level is, no matter how many times you've did it, everybody's always learning. I've been very fortunate where we went out in the very first hunt. It's worked to a T. We've called a bull in just like it was supposed to, textbook, and we've notched the tag. And then the next time we might go out and like we've really 7 or 8 times in a row. Charlie's wife's toucan hunt was a perfect example. We're in one of the best elk spots in the country, anywhere in the world. And me and Charlie looked at each other on day 6 like, are we ever going to figure out how to call an elk in? We did this hundreds of times, yet we are getting our butts whipped in one of the best units in the country. Yeah. And it was frustrating, it's like, what are we going to do?
When Aaron shot his bull last year with his recurve, that was a last minute, last hours, the hunt kind of moment. But we had called in a lot of elk for a week. And then we went home for a couple of days, and then for job stuff. Yep. Then we went back in the woods, and when we got back, it was like the woods were dead, and we had a hard time even finding elk anywhere for about 3 days. And it was kind of like, man, where'd they all go? It's like they all left the country, whether they were there or not. We couldn't really say, but we didn't get any. They weren't talking or anything. Nothing had changed. We're in the same spot. We were there. Timing had changed. Things were a little different. But I strongly believe that a lot of the reason Aaron shot a bull was because we didn't quit ever. And then even in the moment where it looked like everything, we had blown it, it was like, we bumped them, they split, they scattered, there was chaos, looked like the bull left. It was like, man, it seemed like everything had just fallen apart on us. And in that moment, it's very easy, I think, to give up on the wind or to be like, oh, I don't know. And we just kept working it anyway. Yeah. And got out there and realized the bull wasn't too far away. Just tried to sneak through the trees, got about 30 yards closer. When he was about 70, 75 yards away, he had some cows, that were trying to come back to him, and we were in between him and those cows. It was perfect. Things that should have not worked out started working out, and then we just ripped off I did a lip ball, like me and old Bugle. He thought, I think we left because it had been a few minutes since we had done this or whatever, and he just came charging in like madder than hell. And you just don't know what's going to happen. And I think a lot of times, hunters, we could have, when they all spooked, we could have tried to go around or do something else or given up, when really the situation was still salvageable. Yep. There was still fight left, and you could still make something happen.
Yep. Now we preach, it only takes one. No matter how many failed attempts, that 7, 8 failed times, we've been there enough to know that the next time it's a brand new ball game, do the same thing or let the situation play out, and it may be in our favor. We just need that one shot.
And you're out there with, I'm watching Corey Jacobson. We just did a podcast last week talking about his season from last year. He's out there with Randy Newberg in Montana. Now, it's an over-the-counter unit. It's not that easy, but he's in there cranking away, and he's able to – he wasn't able to call in a single elk, really, or get anything. He ended up having to do a spot and stock hunt instead, which was completely out of his wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
And not what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I really think so I like what Corey says when he says there's an elk out there that is callable. There's one that's out there, it's his day to die. But you got to find that. And I think sometimes people, I always looked at it this way early on. I was when I talked to Jim Horn one time, we're talking about early season calling, and he said, if I call every day in multiple setups in the morning for 5 days and nothing happens, it's just a matter of time.
Yep.
And so a lot of guys will quit because they're like, this doesn't work. But day 6, he'll call in 3.
Yep.
Right?
And so I love to kill. As much as I want to call an elk in, just like Corey, as much as I want to call a bull in, I'm also there to kill elk, and I'm not above if I need to spot and stock. If I'm reading the sign and I can smell elk, I can see. Yeah. I'm not above. I'm come from a line of old rifle hunters, old muzzleloader hunters. I can see which way the track's going. I can figure out the landscape really quick and all right, we're going into their territory. We're gonna start the game. We're gonna play the game ourselves.
To be honest, I love spot and stock, and I would prefer that over calling for myself.
Yep.
If I see an elk and it's approachable and stalkable, I feel like I have more control over that situation. The wind is good and sneaking up on him than I do trying to call, and then either he's in the mood or he's not.
Yeah, you could push him out, or he now knows you right where you're at.
Right. So I tend to, I love it. The satisfaction that comes from a good spot and stock is awesome. Not everybody's the same. Corey Jacobson's like, nope, I would much rather take my chances with the bugle tube.
Yeah, and that's where it's like there's no one right way to do it. I look at Chuck Adams, a guy who idolized growing up, watching him kill these giant bulls, and you read some of his articles as a call maker now, or think back on him, you're like, yeah, Chuck, don't write about not wanting to bugle, and if you're going to kill big bulls, never bugle. I'm like, no. I mean, and so he's not necessarily right either, because people prove it year in and year out. You can kill big bulls, but his style, his strategy, like you just mentioned, you'd prefer that. He thinks if you're going to kill a big bull, where there's other guys that kill big bulls year in and year out by calling. Lampers is a guy, he calls aggressively, almost unless he's lying to me, he calls extremely similar to the way we do.
Yep. And I've seen it happen where, a lot of our elk hunting has been our best elk calling has been in areas where there is less pressure.
Yep.
And most of the time we've either drawn a nice tag, and that's why there's less pressure, because there's a limited allotment of hunters in that space. And so the elk have less pressure, and it's just better for calling. Or we've done something that other people aren't crazy or stupid enough to do, like go 12 miles into the eagle caps. And so now we have, again, elk that are very, very, receptive to calling. Versus some areas where it's over the counter, there's hundreds of hunters in there running around, bugling and hunting, and the elk they're not stupid. They've kind of figured out the game, and they're a lot more cautious about that. So calling isn't like you watch a Primos film and you realize they film that on some ranch where nobody's at, and the bull comes charging in. Well, you're in an area where that bull is not educated, and they don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think calling is absolutely fun and the way to go, but certain areas are going to lend themselves to calling. Just because of hunting pressure.
Yep, and that's why I love this. Some of the spots we do, we pick out intentionally some spots where we're spiked out 6 to 8 miles. Hunting pressure is going to be relatively low. I can guarantee there's not dirt bikes. There's not going to be four wheelers. There's not going to be road beaglers. And so I feel going in that my chance that if there is a bull there, I can get him to locate and I can start the game. And so knowing that I want to call an elk in from the get-go, I try to pick spots that lend themselves to that. If I was a spot and stalker, maybe driving some remote roads is if that's even a thing. Some roads that aren't as heavily traveled as some main lanes. Trying to get as much glassed, as much country as possible may be a different strategy. So I'm trying to set myself up to call in an elk.
It really does depend on elk densities too, competition for cows.
Yeah, herd dynamics, how many bulls are there?
Yeah.
Cows, how many different herds are they broke up into?
Whether you're hunting wolf country and the elk are much quieter, they lay low a little more and they move
a lot more.
They move a lot and they tend to move at certain times of the day in different ways, So I think all of that plays a big role too. Yeah. So I think it's been really interesting to see, to implement calling, and I look forward to any kind of tag I draw, because the elk bugle and the excitement that comes from that is a lot different than some over-the-counter unit where it's public land and it's hammered.
Yep, we work a lot harder, and so there's hundreds and hundreds of different strategies. I love to call. It's kind of part of the business, so I love that. But we've got decoys now. It's like, well, who knows if that's the edge I need, and they're going to work in a situation. Why not use them? If there's a giant bull and I'm really hesitant to call, or I don't want to blow them out of the area, why not spot and stalk? And try to. If you go out there with a goal or a way that it needs to be done, then by all means try it. But I'm not above any of those. I want to put a bull in the freezer, or have a chance at that big bull, regardless of what means I make it happen.
I agree. Well, Jason, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast today. Is there anything else we should tag on to this episode? Anything?
I think we're good.
Got anything you want to share?
The calls.
Good. Yeah, I think it was cool. I was very curious. I got a little selfish indulgence here. Went through these calls, kind of felt them out, and I appreciate that. It helps, I think, too. I find that as the hunt progresses, and I hear elk bugling, and I'm bugling back, that I mimic them more, and so my bugle gets more and more authentic, or sounds more like the elk in the woods, the more I listen and then bugle back. You practice, and it's a lot easier for me to mimic a sound, like if you make it and then I try to make it, than it is for me to just make it how I think it should sound.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm in the same exact boat. We always joke around or talk about, like, man, why can't I bottle up that situation or that episode between me and that bull? Why can't I call like that when I'm in here? Because I swear I do some stuff that just like I don't think about, but I'm just straight trying to mimic him. And it's the same thing. As the hunt goes on and I've mimicked hundreds of different bulls, like, man, that was when I'm at my best.
Yep. I agree. And so the best thing I can do is I play the sounds in the car when I'm going down the road, and then I try to hit all those sounds. And that, I find, helps me. I want to do another episode today before we wrap up, and people can catch this one just on, a lot of new people that are getting bugles and reeds and messing around with this. And so a little instruction on how to get started, like, little words of advice and encouragement, because some people get discouraged or they give up entirely. So I want to talk about that a little bit. But thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
Stay gritty, Shrek.
Gritty.
I mean, Phelps.
Hey, easy.